obviously, I kept a close eye on Arsenal last year. We had our 2 games so close to each other, which I think those wins for Arsenal almost derailed our season, because I think if we got that win against you guys at Molineux, our momentum was like sky high. We could have really finished sort of top 4, top 6 at the very least, I think. That loss against you, and then the one at the Emirates as well, just completely threw us off, and we had a really poor end to the season after that. And obviously it just finished all or nothing as well, which I know it didn't end great for you guys, but still it was a good watch over. I really like Arteta. It's shown him in a completely different light, which I do like. But yeah, the start of the season is brilliant. I think a striker is obviously what Arsenal needed, and Jesus, for the amount you got him for, is a fantastic piece of business. Martinelli, if he can keep fit, I think you've got a really scary team there, and I think it's going to be a successful season for Arsenal. It's going to be really interesting to see how you get on.
I hope so, man. What would you say we're lacking?
Possibly just that attack. I don't know. Maybe just that attacking depth. You've got, and I suppose again, this is why we're going to talk about who we're going to talk about. But you got Jesus, Nketiah behind him. I think he's okay. Is he top 6 level at the moment? I don't know. Martinelli, Saka, Smith Rowe. I think 1 or 2 more strong players there in your depth, and I think you've got a good team. It'll be interesting when the Europa kicks off, how they deal with the squad depth and so on. But overall, it's a good team there.
What have you made of, obviously, Mikel Arteta in the regards of, I agree with you. I think All or Nothing showed him in a good light. I feel no man is without weakness. He obviously has faults, has made mistakes. But generally, I think he's the guy for us right now. But, we live in a sport, or we love a sport that is dictated by results. Obviously, if Arsenal don't go and get top 4 now, as a neutral, because you've got no attachment to this, obviously context is key, but would you consider his position? Because money has been spent. He is now our head man. He's a manager now, not even head coach. What would you say would be it? Because I feel at best, we obviously get into top 4. At worst, if his sacking was under consideration, I think it's a thing where he's kind of done what we've wanted Emre to do, in that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. He flushed out the stronger personalities who are not with it. And then maybe someone else who's of the same mold but's able to do better than him could take it over. So where are you at with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to consider with that, because obviously if you get to the end of the season and you've had bad injuries or whatever and you've missed out on the Champions League, it sort of makes sense. But I think you're right. I think the money has been spent in the right areas for him. The striker, I think, was a big one. And I think you would have got top 4 if you had a dedicated striker, last season, other than Lacazette. I think you would have got top 4 and replaced Aubameyang. But I don't know. I think there's pressure on him now, because he's got the squad that he wants really and needs to succeed. But at the same time, there's teams like Spurs who you could argue depth-wise have strengthened as well. There's a lot more competition up there as well. But I think Arsenal just got to keep consistent and try and stay injury-free. I think that's been the issue for them in previous years as well. And I suppose starts to the season for United, I know they won yesterday, but it's been a shaky start for them. Shaky start for Liverpool. Obviously, that just bodes well for Arsenal if they can keep up a decent run.
You're right there, man. Obviously, it's been 3 games where we've played, but we just need to keep on going. What do you make of Ruben Neves? Because way before Pedro Neto was linked with us, if there was any Portuguese man that was going to leave the Midlands and come to London, it was him. Now, for whatever reason, that didn't quite work out. It's more centered around Telemans now and all the others. He was linked with Barca and United. He seems to have gone away with that. I don't know the length of his contract. We was led to believe he had a year left. It's come out that he's actually could be tied down till 2024. The manager clearly wants to keep him. He's a bloody good footballer. I mean, if he ever wants to sign for the Emirates, he's allowed. But yeah, what's going on with him, man?
Yeah. So yeah, it's 2024. His contract again. There was, like I said earlier, there was pictures of him crying after the end of the season. We thought that's it. We're not going to see Neves in a Wolves shirt again, and that's part of why I think our business took so long. I think the board just expected Neves to go straight away and then have this pot of money that they could spend. And for whatever reason, it hasn't happened. Obviously, there was 2 teams, Barcelona, who we just don't know what their financial situation is like, and Manchester United, who just don't know what they're doing at the moment. And obviously, Arsenal were linked sort of last summer. I think you guys were linked quite heavily with him as well. But now with Connor Cody's gone, Neves has become captain. Neves is the club captain now. And I think that sort of indicates that Wolves are putting all their trust in him. And I think if he's still a Wolves player on the 1st of September, early September, he'll sign a new deal at the club. That's probably wishful thinking by me, but I think now he's got that armband. I think, it's showing how much he means to the club.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you look tie him down to a new deal and he does want to move either to Arsenal one day or bigger clubs than us or whatever, but you lot have shown you pay the money, you get the guy, well keep spinning and things like that. I want to speak about Mendes because I don't know where you stand with this Pedro Neto thing, but where do you stand with Mendes? Because that's when I was reading the articles, that's the first thing that got me in the sense of, yes, Arsenal and Wolves may or may not come to an agreement, but it seems like he's gauging Wolves' willingness to sell Pedro Neto, and obviously Arsenal's interest for a winger, and we're trying to find common ground. What have you made of his relationship with Wolves, and where are you at with, obviously, in situations like this?
Yeah, so when it's situations like this, it's frustrating. Wolves fans hate him and whatever else, but there's no secret that Wolves would be nowhere near where they are today without George Mendes. I stand by that. I believe that if any other second division team, try and think of a decent up and coming young player now or whatever, and a championship team signs them like we did with Ruben Neves, you'd be like, what on earth has just happened?
What's going on there?
So. Yeah. So, we got lucky. We signed Jota in the championship. We signed a number of top players when we were in the championship, and that was because of George Mendes. So he's done a lot of favours for us. We wouldn't have got Nunes over the line without him. We wouldn't have got Guedes over the line without him. But then there's a lot of Wolves fans that say, it's part of the Mendes carousel. He'll do us a favour, but then we've got to do him a favour, and that's why people
sword,
now. Yeah, that's why people are now saying about Pedro Neto. It's time for us to owe George Mendes a favour and try and get this deal over the line. Because at the end of the day, he's a football agent. He makes a hell of a lot of money off every deal that he brokers. I think off the Nunes deal, he got about 4.5 million off it. So it's not pocket money. It's a serious amount of money on every deal.
Money,
yeah. So we wouldn't be where we are today without him. But the one thing Wolves have an advantage on over George Mendes is that Gestifute, which is his agency, the Wolves owners own a hell of a lot of shares in that company. So they've got a big, I'm not going to say a say on what he does because he's an agent. He can do what he does. He can speak to who he wants. But Wolves won't be, taken to the cleaners in regards to a fee for any Wolves players. They're going to make sure they get decent fees from whoever we sell to.
And it's now that you said that, because I didn't know that, because obviously we just signed Fabio Vieira, who's ironically another Portuguese man, and it has the same sort of agency and client and things. And between his sale, if obviously the man was speaking about in Neto moves, João Felix or Ronaldo, he's going to get a big payday. Where are you at with Pedro Neto? Obviously, as a footballer, where's his strengths and weaknesses? Because you kind of alluded to goal scoring being one. Where's his strengths and weaknesses? Is he over his knee injury? These are the questions. There's a lot of Arsenal fans we're saying with ourselves, man.
Yeah, so obviously during lockdown, arguably the best Wolves player, a phenomenal player, started adding that sort of ruthlessness in front of goal, scored a winning goal again. I think he scored a goal against you guys in that Jimenez.
Played bloody well against us, man. So I won.
Yeah, and then the Chelsea game as well. We played midweek during lockdown, and he scored a late winner as well. Just by driving forward, he likes to beat his man. He's quick, got a really good turn of pace, a lot of flair, good skill. But yeah, we almost ran him into the ground that season because he'd had an injury for Portugal. He came back, and Nuno basically said, "I need him to play, otherwise we might get relegated." Because we were genuinely in that bit of trouble. So Wolves strapped his knee up, and then it done. I think it was a broken patella, is it, in his knee? So that had gone, and it basically broken kneecap. We thought, he's going to be out probably until sort of September, October. Turned out he was out until the new year. But he's come back, and he had a slow start last year. We had to ease him back in. But by the end of the season, he looked like, he started to look like the old Pedro Neto. Pre-season, he was probably our best player. Looked sharp, liked to beat his man, started testing the goalkeeper a little bit more. But there is still that part of Pedro Neto's game that he needs to improve, is what I've mentioned, is his ruthlessness and decision-making in front of goal. There's chances like, against Fulham, for argument's sake, he missed, in my opinion, quite a basic open goal just by either not adjusting his body right, not using the right technique. He did it a couple of years ago in the Europa League where he rounded the goalkeeper and then skied it over the bar. Just little things like that.
I remember that, Yeah. Was it with his right foot?
Yeah, something like that. But
I might remember that.
Yeah, it's just little things like that. And I think, Wolves, well, I suppose you can't really get away with it. At Arsenal, I don't know, there's going to be a hell of a lot of pressure if he starts missing opportunities like that. I know Wolves fans are bad. Arsenal fans are probably equal. They're going to jump on his back.
To us, man.
Yeah.
Arsenal fans can be pricks, let's be real. Yeah. I can say it, Arsenal fans, I'm an Arsenal fan. We can be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on the result, man. You're right in that regard.
Yeah, so that's just the one area I think he needs to improve. But as a footballer, to be honest, his temperament and his mindset is that he wants to play at the top. He's made no secret of that. He said that when he first joined Wolves, He wants to play in the Champions League. He wants to play for the best teams in the world. So I'm not expecting him to stay at Wolves for the rest of his career. So I think he has got the right mindset, and he aims for the top. He's a good footballer.
I mean, another question a lot of Arsenal fans have been asking me and having a conversation between themselves. Obviously, you're a Wolves man, but if he's coming into this team now, I think Arsenal, we're getting into that position a little bit by little bit. We're not quite there where if we're not bringing in better than what we have, I don't think we should necessarily target squad players. If anything, someone should arrive and make someone a squad player. I like Pedro Neto. Like you said, he's exciting, can go down the wing, can link up play centrally, could add more goals and assists. But at 22, you can't really ask for much. He's an exciting player. Would you say he starts ahead of Martinelli, Saka, potentially Smith Rowe off that left, or anyone that's starting week in, week out for that matter at Arsenal?
I don't think he starts ahead of them, no. And that's another, like I said earlier, for Arsenal, I think you want to strengthen your team. You want more depth, definitely. But I don't think, especially with the form they're both on right now, Martinelli and Saka, I don't think he starts ahead of them. But I think, in the Europa League or whatever, he's going to be a fantastic player to bring off the bench. He's going to add a hell of a lot of energy, that pace. If you're a fullback and you've been marking Martinelli or whatever for 60, 65 minutes, you're going to get fed up when someone like Pedro Neto is coming off the bench. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a fantastic squad player for you. I think eventually he could break into the team, but you got a couple of, in Martinelli, Saka, players like Neto. You got a lot of young, hungry footballers that are going to want to be playing a lot of football. But it's the timing for me. This one, it's quite late in the window. The World Cup's coming up. Pedro Neto isn't a cert for the Portugal squad. He's going to want to be playing football. And that's why I don't think this transfer, just the timing of it just seems a little bit off at the moment.
Exactly. Like you said, obviously it's a bit of a weird one because, again, you can't really take media sources to be creditable, but it seemed like Pedro Neto wasn't for sale. Thursday, Friday, you saw rumblings. Again, it's not exactly what the club are saying, that he could be available. And obviously in this new week, it's intensified in relation to Pedro Neto to Arsenal. So I don't know if it's the client, the agent, the club. I don't know what it is in relation to that, but you're right on the timing. Obviously, you've brought a winger in. I don't necessarily think that's a replacement. I think, obviously, you said it earlier, Wolves struggle to score goals, bring a lot of players in whose strengths are in the final third to go with Pedro Neto, this guy, and anyone else you've got. And we have to give you lot time to get a replacement. At the end of the day, if we offer you something you can't refuse, then you're not going to refuse it. But we need to be real with ourselves. He's tied down. I think he signed a new deal in March. Forgive me if I'm wrong. About 5 years on his deal, 22. Obviously, Wolves could sit there and say, well, he's just coming back from injury. Arsenal might use that to say knock the price down. It comes down to, have you got the money? Like you see with all these Premier League clubs, have you got the money? How much would you put his valuation at? Not that we're in charge of that, but
no, of course. Well, I said straight away, I think Wolves have got to be demanding at least £50 million for to sign him. And I know I put that out. A lot of Wolves fans disagreed and said we should be going for more, as in like 70, 75 million pounds. I don't think currently, I don't think he's worth that. I think if, yes, I know he's got 5 years left on his deal, but since his injury, he hasn't done enough to prove that he should be a top six consistent starter. And that's when you're talking sort of 70, 75 million pounds. If he has another good year or good 6 months up until January, has a good World Cup for argument's sake, I think that's where you can start looking and demanding that sort of money. But if Arsenal came in with a bid now for £50 million, I think if it was 3 weeks ago and Arsenal said, here's £50 million, I think Wolves would seriously consider it. But because now it's so late in the window, I think it'd be a much more difficult deal to get done.
Would you take it?
50 million.
You're the decision maker at Wolves.
It depends if George Mendes comes up to me now and says, Dave, here's £50 million. I've got another winger here waiting for you. If I know we can get a replacement in, I'm not going to say it's going to be someone of exactly the same quality, because I don't think you'd be able to. But if Mendes or whoever, we had a replacement ready, I would 50 million. Possibly.
Sell-on clause.
Yeah. A few add-ons in there. Sell-on clause, yeah. I'd be considering it, yeah.
Let me play devil's advocate. Do you think you got your replacement already then? Because obviously there has to have been Neves, Neto on the board. They might stay or they might leave. Again, I think you've brought in that Grizides guy to kind of supplement your attack and be an addition.
Yeah.
Could you play devil's advocate and say that's almost a replacement? Because I look back to when Arsene Wenger was saying, oh, we're bringing in Giroud to play with Van Persie. Lo and behold, you saw what happened. Do you reckon it could be something like that?
I think when we signed him, nowhere in my mind did I think, oh God, Neto or whoever's going to go. That never crossed my mind. Arsenal fans have suggested that, which I fully understand from that point of view. But we've got Adama Traore's future is undecided. We've got a serious injury to the young winger Chiquinho. So in terms of wingers now, we've got, and if we want to play a 4-2-3-1, obviously we have to put some of these in, as a number 10. You've got Hwang, Neto, Podence, Guedes, and that's ignored, and say Adama. So that's 5 wingers. But if you're playing a 4-2-3-1, you need at least 3 of those playing anyway. So I think Wolves have got the right amount of attacking players. Our squad depth overall is still small. So Wolves will be putting themselves in a lot of danger if they were to let Neto go, in my opinion, just because of the overall squad depth.
You kind of mentioned it, and obviously, you said some Wolves fans, rightly or wrongly, are justifying more. Do you think they're right? Because on one hand, I do think the Premier League is not what a player is necessarily worth; it's what you can hustle and negotiate. And not to say Arsenal are the best negotiators in the world, because we're not in terms of incomings and outgoings, but in a nice way, I find we're a bit stingy. Like we're ready to walk away if things aren't happening. Where if you look at United, they'll just give you what you want. But if I was a Wolves man, I've seen it's not the same, but Maguire's gone for 80 odd. You just sold Gibbs White. You couldn't really scratch the surface of your first team for X amount. Yes, Neto has got an injury, and if I was on Arsenal's side or I did have an injury, I'll be leveraging that. But whether he's worth it or not, like, aren't they, within their rights to ask for more, bro? Potentially.
Yeah, for sure. The frustrating thing with Wolves, and I'm hoping they've learned from this, is when we sold Jota. I said on our Wolves podcast yesterday.
Make sure you're following Talking Wolves, by the way.
There's still people moaning about George Mendes. Like, I did a transfer video yesterday talking about our signings, and people say this is what happens. George Mendes, yes, they hype us up and get those players, but then he's going to throw it all back in our face and sell Neto. But not once has George Mendes ripped us, or Wolves haven't almost been ripped off in selling players. The one that somebody brought up was Jota, which at the time, I think we got £40 million for him. But at the time, he was our 4th choice winger. He didn't play well at all after lockdown. And for both clubs, both Liverpool and Wolves, it was a good deal. It was the right amount of money. Yes, gone on and done really, really well at Liverpool, and they would make more money on that for sure. But at that point, it was a good deal. But Wolves structured that so badly in the fact that Liverpool were paying the 40 million across like 6 or 7 years. Like, wow. We're making no stupid. It was good for financial fair play, but in terms of actual rapid income, like money that we could just happily spend, it was non-existent.
Yeah, that could be actively reinvested. It's not that, is it?
And that's why I know with the Arsenal thing, I know there's been reports of you maybe paying 35 million or whatever, but there's also reports that they're hoping that Wolves are going to be quite kind and structure them a deal. I don't think now Wolves will be stupid enough to entertain that anymore, and that's the one thing really. I think because, like I said, because it's so late in the window, Wolves have got every right to demand that little bit more money. If Arsenal have got the money or are willing to pay it, is a different matter.
I mean, you're fully right, because at the end of the day, I would rather, if we can't get the Netos and we didn't get Rafinha and things like this, players actually I'm personally prepared to leave it. I'd rather us sign the centre mid, and even that same logic is somewhat there. But Arsenal, you lot can leverage the fact that at the end of the day, you're letting Pepe go. Saka needs someone to be competition with or come in instead of him, and you haven't quite got that. You either pay the money or you don't. How good do you think he could be? Because one carrot of Arsenal is obviously we're doing this youngster thing of sorts. We haven't signed players that are the finished article. As much as I like Gabriel Jesus' strengths and what he's brought, we need to kind of focus on his weaknesses, because that's the only way you're going to get to the next level. Yeah. Pedro Neto isn't the finished article, or it wouldn't just be Arsenal allegedly in for him, and there'd be a lot more than 35, 50 odd million quoted in the papers. So what do you think his ceiling's at, man?
His ceiling is, he's nowhere near reached his potential. I think, he's already for sure a top 10 winger, definitely. And this is Pedro Neto we're watching now that's just come off the back of a serious injury. So
yeah,
he's never really had one full consistent season. The first year he was at Wolves, he sort of struggled to break into the team, but he was such a young, inexperienced player. The season after was when he had a really good season, then it was ruined before the end by injury. And last year he only came back for, let's say, a third or a quarter of the season. So this year will be interesting to see if he's staying at Wolves, if he's going to get one big season under his belt. And that's why I think part of me thinks Arsenal should wait. From Arsenal's point of view, wait and see how good he actually comes on to be. But on the other end of that, if he does have a really good season, then his value is just going to shoot sky high. I think he's got all the ability and potential to be a top 4 winger for sure. But like I said, the one area that he really needs to improve is just his ruthlessness and decision making in front of goal.
What's he like defensively? Because obviously a key part of Mikel Arteta's game is that relentless press, actually being able to put in the shift. So what is he like off the ball? What's he like when things actually go wrong as well? Like if he's made a mistake, if things are not happening, where does he stand in times of crisis? Because that's one thing I look for in Arsenal. That's actually why I'm happy about Jesus and Zinchenko, I feel. And you probably see it, you know, when your team is confident, things are going right, everybody can do everything. When things are going wrong, it takes a certain character to want to keep trying things. So where's he at when he's had to react to mistakes or things like that? And how good is he off the ball?
Yeah, so I think a good example of like his defensive work rate and his position and stuff would have been if you caught any part of the game against Tottenham on Sunday, because on paper Wolves would have been playing a 4-3-3 with Neto on the right hand side. But when we were out of possession, Neto almost stayed back as a right wing back and just completely marked Perisic out of the game. So if you watch that, Wolves switch to a back 5 and Neto was playing as basically as a right wing back just to take Perisic out of the game completely. So obviously that was a game plan by Bruno Lage, but Adama Traore got asked to do that role and couldn't do it anywhere near as good as Pedro Neto in the second half. In terms of temperament, I think there is still, let's say, that Portuguese side to him where he likes to bend the rules every now and then to try and get things in his own way. A little bit like you saw with Bruno Fernandes, a little bit like we've seen with Daniel Podence quite often as well. And I'm sure, obviously, you guys have seen it over the years with certain players as well. But I think overall, in terms of, his focus and his determination to try and, when things aren't quite going right, to turn things his way, I think it's really good. And, he is a type of player, I think, that could, if you're down, you're struggling, I think he's the type of player to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and try and make things happen. He's so good on the ball, so good with his turn of pace. He'll beat your defenders probably 8 or 9 times out of 10. He will drive the ball forward as well. If there is a particular game where Arsenal might be playing counter-attacking for whatever reason, he's going to be able to pick you the ball up from deep and try and drive you sort of 20, 30 yards up the pitch.
I mean, obviously, I'm sure he has a preferred position either on the left and the right. I'd probably take an educated guess and say it's on the right. But how effective is he from the left and the right hand side? Because I think if we're bringing in a winger, they have to be able to play there. I always get a lot of stick from Arsenal fans. I always hear this: "Oh, Saka's got to play on the right. Pepe's got to play on the left." Any professional footballer, much less a top 6 club, if you can't play on the left and the right and affect the game, then we shouldn't be trying to sign you, or you shouldn't be at the club, full stop. In fact, I think that goes for everybody in the Prem. So, yeah, is he more effective from the left and the right? What do you get from him?
I personally, prefer him. I do prefer him on the left, but that's more as a winger rather than like an inside forward or whatever, because obviously he's got a strong left foot. But even though he is on the left, he can sort of get down to the byline and almost, beat his man. I saw him, but this was a little bit when he'd come back from injury. He played on the right last year, and I wasn't overly convinced with him. But I think that's because he lacked that little bit of confidence after his injury to sort of beat his man and get on the ball. But like I said, on Saturday, he played on the right-hand side, and I think he's a player that isn't afraid to have a go at goal and shoot at goal. So if you are playing him on the right, he will cut in on his strong left foot and try and get some shots away. But I think if you are wanting him as a winger, someone to, drive forward and get the ball into the area, the left-hand side is probably where he plays best. We've also seen him play as a striker. I don't think he's going to be, the best number 9 in the world, but he is definitely good enough to play as a striker as well if you wanted him to.
That's facts, man. I mean, that I can't disagree, man. You've sold me on the player, man. I think we need to go and get it, man. You've got a question there. What about Podence? I'm not sure what you're actually being asked there, but maybe it's about Podence's form. I know when he first signed, I mean, he was on fire. As an Arsenal fan, I'm sure we've seen Podence before he played for Wolves. I'm sure he played against us in Europa League. He was at Olympiacos or something like that. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Podence is still there. He's started the first 3 games, I think. So he's somebody that, has played through the middle as a striker, as a number 10. He played out on the wing on Saturday as well. And again, he's another player like Neto, where, Podence is quite a little bit older, but Podence, it just needs some consistency. Whenever he has a good spell for Wolves, he either drops a stinker or gets injured, and it just breaks a good run of form. But when he's on it, Podence, he could be one hell of a player. But he's like Neto, where his decision making and his final end product in front of goal just lets him down. But on the ball, he's brilliant. But like I said, sort of with bending the rules and his sort of whinginess and dirtiness, Podence is definitely up there. We get a lot of comments after matches saying how Wolves are are disgusting with the way they roll around on the floor. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, that's probably Podence.
I mean, to be honest, man, no one likes it when it happens against your team. But as an Arsenal fan, I think I like to see Jesus do it now. He's done it on a couple of occasions. I think we're a bit too honest. I think you've got to do that in the Premier. It's frustrating when it happens against you. You love it when it's obviously benefiting you. Well, people, get your comments in. Couple questions for I let Dave get out of here. I think 50 million is outrageous for Neto. I would have preferred the Dutch guy instead. To be fair, to be brutally honest, I actually don't think 50 million is that bad. You know, potentially with obviously he hasn't got the strongest output in terms of statistics. He's not exactly, well, he's a Premier League footballer, but he's not exactly a household name. He has had an injury. I hear it. I hear all of that stuff. But 50 million for a 22-year-old, we've done a lot worse with Pepe. I do believe a lot in his potential, whether it's at Arsenal or elsewhere. Obviously, we're trying to do this youngster thing, stars of tomorrow. And I think he is someone that can help us in the short term, medium term. And obviously, whether it be with all these attackers, but with the Jesuses, the Sakas, the Smith Rowes, everyone else, he can grow with them. And I also think, you know, if he's, like you said, he's not an international recognized footballer like that. So if he does become that, there's resale value. And you look at Liverpool, what selling Coutinho did for them and how they reinvested it, and what, even for a short time, what they've gone on and done, that is something. So when I look at Pedro Neto, Odegaard, Jesus, Martinelli, they're actually good players with resale value. And as you said, Pedro Neto is an intelligent player. I think off the ball, he'll thrive under Arteta. On it, clearly, there's a lot of growth to be done. Respectfully to Wolves, I think he'll be around some stronger attackers, so he'll look a lot better and mix and match a lot more. I still think we'd be lacking a centre mid, which is why if we could, just a cheeky offer to see what could happen with Ruben Neves. We'll give you Ainsley Maitland-Niles. You bidded for him before, but I'd prefer him over Cody Gakpo. Obviously, you know, a year's a wonderful thing. I've obviously seen Neto a lot more. I think Cody Gakpo is very raw. I think he's someone that if they go and play for, I don't know, Dortmund or something, we'll all be saying we need to sign him in a year or so. But we've already got raw talent. So I kind of, not that Pedro Neto kind of is raw, but he's more cooked than him. So if we're going to do something like that, I think we do that. If I had my way, it would have been Rafinha, but that didn't happen, did it? It didn't happen, man. It's mad. Yeah. 50 million for a backup is a lot. Not sure about it. The thing is he a backup though? Someone's got to miss out, really and truly. You got to make sure you're doing your job, really and truly.
More an option, like a squad player, rather than a backup, isn't it? I think, you know, he'll get game time. He'll get a decent amount of game time. I don't think he's going to be someone that you're going to give. Come on, he won't join Arsenal if he knows he's going to come on for 5 minutes every game. You know, he's going to want game time. And if Arsenal can sign him for whether it is 45, 50 million or whatever, if Arsenal can sign him and get and him be the Pedro Neto I know and play him in the Europa League and Martinelli in the league or vice versa, you know, you're going to get a good player there and a fresh player every game then. So the one thing I would say is that he won't play for Wolves in the Cup, or he won't start for Wolves in the Cup tonight anyway. So don't get excited if you don't see him on the lineup for Wolves tonight.
I mean, don't listen to him, man. That means he's moving closer to moving to us. But you're fully right, and I think fans try to have their cake and eat it. I've seen Arsenal fans cry about we're relying on the same old players. We need depth. You know, last season we struggled where we're really just in one competition. So then you can't get them giggity over, is Neto going to start? It's like, we're not Man City, but it's like any player, attacking player. If you join City, you might not play every week. Make sure, not Mikel Arteta, Pep Guardiola has no reason to leave you out. The logic in that wouldn't have seen Jota going to Liverpool. And I know he frustrates a lot of Liverpool fans, but he's given them another option, really. You know, again, I think we need that. And it gives us different options. Obviously, right now, the flavour of the month is Gabriel Jesus, Saka, and Martinelli. You could have Pedro Neto with either role. You could have Martinelli drop out and maybe Smith roll back into the fold. Eddie, if he goes for another purple patch, that might see Jesus moved out wide or him start out wide. You need different options. It's 38 Premier League games alone, let alone if you go all the way in the FA Cup and all of these other things, which I hope we obviously do. So I think Pedro Neto, if he signs, he has to back himself. I mean, we have to have done our due diligence because we've been scouting him a lot. You know, just don't make yourself a backup, really and truly, if I'm honest with you. You know, you will have to be a rotationary option, but you'll get your chance. And I'm prepared for that. It seems like Arteta's going off the Pep model of having multiple kind of players and more or less a strong sort of core of a squad versus you're starting every week, week beyond the obvious, the Sakas, the Xhakas, etc. I'm here for it, if I'm completely honest with you, man. There's a lot of resale value. Has there been any other transfer news with your players? Obviously, I see Moutinho signed a new deal. Neves, we've spoken about. Neto, we've spoken about.